I was going for Beetlejuice, but I feel like I've fallen somewhere between Robert Smith and the patient from the Black Parade.
Well, anyway, sweetheart, let's get the show on the road.
So I became obsessed with Beetlejuice recently. I never watched the film growing up, and in the lead up to the sequel coming out, I decided to watch the original, then I watched the original again, then I watched the sequel at the cinema, and then I watched the original a third time. I am currently obsessed with Beetlejuice. And as I was watching the sequel at the cinema, and how Jenna Ortega's character is presented as a bookworm, I got to thinking, what is every Beetlejuice character's favourite book?
Well, sweetheart, let's tear these characters apart.
He's not a cowboy! Anyway, let's go through both Beetlejuice films and decide what each of the main characters' favourite books and authors are, with the exception of Charles Deetz, because he has no personality at all, and his actor is, look him up. Let's start with the first two characters we meet, Adam and Barbara Maitland. Adam Maitland lives a Stephen King life. The guy lives in a big house on a hill in a small town in probably New England. He dresses and behaves like a Stephen King character. He owns a little hardware store in town and he knows all the locals. He is a Stephen King character. And I got to thinking that maybe he is actually secretly obsessed with Stephen King, and moving to this town, this house, this was him living out his Stephen King fantasy. And then I got a little bit deeper. Not only is he obsessed with Stephen King, but he's obsessed specifically with Pet Sematary. And that's why he and his wife live in a big house all alone with no pets or kids, because Pet Sematary is all about pets and kids getting the chop. And he's learned a lot from that novel. He knows exactly how to behave. He wants to live out his Stephen King fantasy, but he's not taking any chances of anything coming true. So no pets, no kids, and the wonderful irony of all of this is that a dog is the reason he and his wife die. As for Barbara Maitland, I think she's a bit of an Anglophile. She lives out in the countryside in a really old house surrounded by rolling green hills. It's very English countryside vibes. So I am positive that she reads a whole lot of Jane Austen, and this is also the reason she's pretty funny. She's a lot funnier than her husband is, and that's because she was inspired by the wit and humour of Jane Austen. And so of course her favourite Jane Austen novel is Pride and Prejudice, which is full of sardonic wit, sarcastic humour, and women who clap back against the men in their lives. She is 100% an Anglophile and an Austen fanatic. And what about the absolutely iconic Lydia Deetz, played by the even more iconic Catherine O'Hara?
If you don't let me gut out this house and make it my own, I will go insane and I will take you with me!
I have a lot of thoughts about her, and I really want you to disagree with me in the comments, because I think I've gone a little bit wild with this. For the fact that Catherine O'Hara is a queer icon, Lydia Deetz is deceptively conservative. She makes a lot of art, but her art isn't very good. So I think she claims to be obsessed with Virginia Woolf. She really likes Mrs. Dalloway and she's learned a lot from that book. But secretly, without telling anyone, she thinks that Orlando is offensive trash. She doesn't actually understand Virginia Woolf, but she likes her aesthetic, she likes her vibes, and so she tells everyone that Mrs. Dalloway is her favourite novel. She also likes to tell people that she reads a lot of international fiction, but this is a Tim Burton film, so we need to make sure that these international authors are all still white. French authors like Annie Ernaux are a pretty good shout, maybe Polish author Olga Tokarczuk. But then I started thinking about the surrealism of her art and her whole life situation, and I thought to myself, yeah, it is pretty possible that she was influenced by Haruki Murakami, which plays into the idea that she's pretty straight and pretty conservative, in spite of Catherine O'Hara. Lydia Deetz is easy. She's obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe. She tells everyone she is, and she really truly is.
My whole life is a dark room. One big, dark room.
She writes poetry, she writes short stories, she's obsessed with capturing the moment. This bitch loves Edgar Allan Poe. But behind closed doors, when she's alone in her room, she also likes reading Anne Rice novels, but she would never tell anyone that because Anne Rice despite being gothic as hell, is way too trendy for her. When the book begins, the last thing she'd ever want to read is a haunted house story, but by the time the first film wraps, she discovers and becomes obsessed with Shirley Jackson. We also cannot forget about Jane, the nosy real estate agent. Jane has only ever read the Bible, and she truly believes that the Bible is the only book you ever need to read. The toughest character to figure out, I have to admit, and this took me by surprise, was Otho. So again, I want you to let me know in the comments if you have any ideas about Otho, because that guy is very queer-coded, he wears a lot of hats, he lives in New York City, he's an interior decorator, and I kept thinking he probably reads a lot of biographies of famous women. The guy definitely subscribes to a lot of magazines, he's got a New Yorker subscription, and he actually does read it. Every big New York magazine he reads, and in his downtime he enjoys biographies, preferably autobiographies of famous women. But he has to have a secret, and I think that's that he really enjoys the Marquis de Sade. And then we come to the man of the hour, Beetlejuice. Can Beetlejuice read? That's up for debate, but let's say he can. That guy spends most of his time reading obituaries for fun, and he also enjoys browsing medical textbooks about deadly diseases, parasites, and flesh-eating bacteria. He thinks Franz Kafka stories are pure comedy, and he does not get the irony of the bureaucracy of the afterlife and the waiting room. And of course, he has no idea that The Exorcist was a book first. And then we come to the cast of the second film, beginning with Astrid Deetz, the reason that this video exists. Astrid is annoying because I'm willing to bet that she has read plenty of feminist philosophers. Bell Hooks, Judith Butler, Sarah Ahmed, Simone de Beauvoir, Mona Chollet, and then she falls for the first psychopathic man she comes across. Unbelievable. Now, the best character in that whole film was easily Willem Dafoe's character, Wolf Jackson, and we all know what kinds of books he reads. They are the exact kinds of books I have never ever touched. Gritty crime thrillers that men read when they go on holiday. Joe Nesbo, John Grisham, Lee Child, Jeffrey Deaver. I don't actually know if these are the right choices, because I've never read these men. Tell me if I'm wrong. Now, for the character of Rory, I actually had to do a bit of research. Obviously, Rory is a big Jordan Peterson fan, but he also reads genuine books by genuine pickup artists, and these books really exist. The Art of Seduction, The Rational Male, you always know a book is good when it uses male as a noun. The Game, The Mystery Method. These are real things, and Rory loves them. And of course we can't forget about Bob, sweet, sensitive Bob. He likes science fiction, especially Becky Chambers. And finally we have the psycho himself, Jeremy. Jeremy's easy. He likes Ayn Rand books and Frank Miller comics. Frank Miller fans, please come for me in the comments. I hope you had as much fun with this as I did. If you did, support me on Patreon at patreon.com/WillowTalksBooks. Thank you in advance, and subscribe for books.